Hello and welcome everyone to this second talent track session here with UX Design Awards. So welcome to everyone joining here on Zoom, and also welcome to everyone on LinkedIn. So nice that you are all here. We will have a very interesting half an hour together because we are going to talk about a very interesting project today. So before we get started, one recommendation, please mute yourself. If you don't want to talk, we will have time for a little Q&A later. So save your words and questions for later after our awesome presentation. So a few words about me. My name is Patricia Reines, and I'm going to moderate this session today. I'm a UX UI designer and lecturer at Hochschule Mainz. So like I said, this is already like the second session of this talent track series. The goal is to put a very special spotlight on some of our promising young guns, to have some kind of a little sneak peek into their thought process and hear about their award-winning project. So this will be quite interesting today because, like I said, we will have one of the winners today with us and hear about his process, his project, and yeah, we'll get a lot of really interesting insights. Before we get started, a few words about the UX Design Awards for everyone who is here for the first time and haven't joined one of our other awesome sessions here on LinkedIn and Zoom. The UX Design Awards are a global competition for great user experiences, and they were founded by the International Design Organization, the IDZ, in Berlin, with a special focus on great user experiences for any kind of services. So for not only for screen design, but for products, for prototypes, for service, for any kind of experiences. And today will be really interesting because we will talk about a very interesting topic. We all, I guess, like most people who are listening right now, are either designers themselves or working with designers or in the design industry at some point. So we all know the value of design, especially when it comes to great user experience design. It's not only about usability, but also about accessibility, right? So about inclusion, about integrating or including different kind of user groups, and think about these kind of users that are some kind of forgotten at some point. So I think it's really interesting, when it comes to the project we will talk about today, right? So we all know about the importance of user experience design, and that's the reason why these kind of events were founded or were started, not only for a competition, for winning something, but also for kind of starting discussions, having a community where we share learnings, where we ask questions, and where we learn about different kind of processes. So this is, I think, like a really good opportunity for all of us to ask questions, to have some discussions also later today. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the UX Design Awards, feel free to check out the links in the chat. There are all the links, so you can follow us and see what we are doing if you want to learn a little bit more about us and our upcoming. Awesome. So nice that you're all here. So I don't want to lose too much time and really want to focus or put the emphasis on our main act tonight, which is Siddharth Ahuja. He's UX designer from India, and he's going to talk about his award, about his project, which won the UX Design Awards in the category of New Talent for an awesome concept and great user experience design. And a few words about him. He's starting his own agency right now in India. He previously worked at a fintech startup called Small Case, and he studied at the Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design, where he also made the project he's going to talk about. And this project is called Yoguide, helping the blind do yoga at home. So quite an interesting project, quite an interesting approach. And I am really looking forward to hear more about that and about your process. So welcome, Siddharth Ahuja. So nice that you are here. Welcome. And I would say the screen is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Yeah, thanks for the kind intro. I will just get started with sharing my screen. Yeah, so thank you, first of all, everyone, for joining in. I see the number of participants going up all the time. So just thank you so much for just taking out an hour of your time and joining this. And thanks for the opportunity to present this as well. A bit about me, like Patricia mentioned, I am a UX designer from India. I've mostly been working in the digital product design space, mostly with early stage startups. And as she also mentioned, I've started a design agency with my very talented colleagues, which is called Prophecy. I'm also an amateur, a very bad musician, as you can see by the guitars in the background. I can play a bunch of instruments, none of them really well. But today is not about that. Today is about the project called Yoguide. And I just wanted to talk about a little about the process that kind of led to its creation, just take you on that journey with me. This presentation is more about the how it came into existence than what it really is, even though it does capture that too. So the story starts in 2019 in Copenhagen, where I was attending college at CIID before the pandemic was a thing. Remember that time, right? Kind of, kind of seems like such a long time ago. But yeah, story starts here, and this was my final project at Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design. This was a 2 month long project, and I strongly believe in inclusive and accessible design, and so I wanted to just practice that. And I just kind of dived right in with this starting point, right? Can being visually impaired reduce independence or autonomy of someone? And you'll see this term being used throughout the slides, VI, which is visually impaired, which in this project means someone who has less than 10% vision. So I was jumping into this completely new space, which I knew really nothing about. And yeah, what do you do when you know nothing about something? You just start talking to people. And so that's what I did. I started with these three folks who were very gracious with their time. Birgit, who was an assistive tech consultant at IBOS, which is the Institute of Blind and Partially Sighted in Copenhagen, and Lalit and Sparsh, who are two incredibly smart, visually impaired people I know. So just talking to them kind of gave way to these three big points that I understood, which was outdoor navigation, how you get from point A to point B, figuring out public transport, traffic, memorizing routes, etc. Social aspects, making a mess eating food was something Lalit had said, and he felt quite embarrassed by it and wanted to fix it. And even not recognizing people by their voice, right, led to some awkward situations. Uh, and fitness independence, which was not being able to exercise independently. And all of them were quite insightful, but Birgit suggested I take the road less traveled, which is the fitness route. And what I mean by this is that the other two categories have been tackled quite a lot actually by companies like Google, Microsoft. And I wanted to kind of go into a space which no one had tried solving yet. And so I think better than me, the fitness problem can be described by Birgit. So I'm going to play this video.
Most people have some if they are very almost blind, so that they have navigation problems, they would have some routes that they know. That could be to the bus, and then the bus to, and then walk to their workplace. But going places you don't know can be difficult. If you stay at home more than sighted people do, then you might like to do some exercising to keep you fit. And because and it could be that it's that getting to the fitness center, it could be so tiring, so because it's difficult, so that you think, okay, should I go down there? But then of course there are a lot of apps that training with training videos, and they're almost always like, do like me, look at this picture and do like me. So how do a blind person know if you're doing it right? You can't put yourself in front of a mirror and say, okay, I'm supposed to do that with my arm. Is that what I'm doing? My arm, is it? Maybe you actually don't really know if it's out here or up there.
Yeah, so basically what she was talking about is that visual confirmation is impossible. You don't really know if you're doing a pose right. And even going out to a fitness center is pretty exhausting. And even that, I think, better than me, Inga can explain this.
I don't have a car. I can just pop into, just go up to this yoga class. I have to do arrangements, and it takes a lot of my energy. Whereas training at home gives me energy because I don't have all the practical stuff around.
Yeah, so pretty much going out, this quote kind of stuck with me that going to a fitness center takes energy, but exercising at home gives me energy. And I wondered why you can't exercise at home. So, like Birgit mentioned, it's all videos and apps which are telling you what to do, but you don't really know if you're doing it correctly, right? How do you know if your arm is over here or over here? And so that led to this opportunity, which was helping visually impaired people achieve independence in their fitness practice doing yoga at home. So why yoga? Yoga is just, I feel, a good exercise to do at home, and you don't have to buy any extra equipment. It's like holistic body exercise. So I went looking for directions again. When you don't know anything, just talk to people. So that's what I did. Um, just trying to get knowledge from people who have been doing this for years. And he's an expert in mobility with visually impaired folks. And he's been doing this for 20 plus years. He's been doing yoga, exercise, sports, all kinds of things related to mobility. And I took some very, very extreme ideas, which I had brainstormed with my peers at CID, and I showed them to him. And he criticized them really heavily, which is which was really cool. He criticized them a lot, and he told me what the ideal solution should be like. And he said this, that it's impossible to learn to exercise by yourself. You definitely need guidance. And this guidance thing was really insightful. I wanted to go deep into this, so that's kind of what I did. Just diving deeper into what guidance actually meant, or if this is true. And following that trail led me to Nadia. She has been teaching yoga to visually impaired folks for 10 years. And this was easily one of the most insightful conversations I've ever had. And so with her, I wanted to understand how is that yoga actually taught to VI folks. Is the guidance principle actually true? Like, why do you need guidance? And how does a yoga session look like for VI versus sighted people, right? So I attended a session. That's me on the left with the long hair. This was in Copenhagen, and Nadia was kind of a personal guide. She was taking care of just three or four, maximum four people at a time, and individually looking for everyone's yoga session. And what she told me was kind of reaffirming the guidance thing. She said, "Don't just give out instructions. Correct the pose when they're doing it wrong, and guiding them to the right pose is important. Guiding them to the right pose is important."
Ahjua சாப்பிட்டா நிறைய சாப்பிடுறியா அப்படின்னு கேட்டா
Uh,
சாப்பாடு இறங்க மாட்டேங்குது.
just a friendly reminder to mute, please. Okay. Yeah, so guiding to the right pose is important as it kind of helps in forming a mental model. So, like Birgit said, everything was visual, and sighted people can actually see and know if they're doing it right. Like, you can see your trainer, you can see a video, and you see your arms in the same place. But with VI people, it's not the same. It's only possible to learn when you do the right pose and you feel the strain in your muscles. You feel how your joints are oriented, right? That's how you know you're doing the right pose, and then you remember that, not the visual of it. And yeah, so this is what I learned from her. This was really cool. I saw this in action. So I was seeing how she actually gives out instructions. And so she would say something like, raise your arms above your head. And then she would actually check, are all the body parts where they're supposed to be. And for example, if she found out the elbows are not okay, then she would see which ones are not okay. And then she would say, straighten and stretch your left arm. So it's pointing straight towards the ceiling, like very concrete instructions like that. And that, as you will see later on, fed right into Yoguide. So now that I had this confirmation again from another expert that personal guidance is kind of the way to go, I wanted to try it out. And Fleming and Inga were both very, very gracious to invite me to their homes to try this out. Um, yeah, both of them are visually impaired, and so this is how it looked like. I was at their homes giving out yoga instructions pretty much, and it started out like that. It evolved. There was some technology involved, which I'll get to later, and this this stayed true. However, always the notion of this personal guide, right? He said, I feel like I'm getting more personal attention. And Ingo also mentioned the best trainers correct my pose at each step. That's how I learned. And so that led to Yoguide, the concept. And Yoguide, I think better than me explaining it verbally, I've made a tiny video with the help of Fleming. So here it is.
Hello, my name is Flemming Soby. I'm a 58 years old man living in this apartment with my wife Mel. I have been visually impaired for about 30 years. When you're visually impaired, you got there's some trouble about transportation to the studio. You use a lot of energy to take public transportation and so on.
And why can't you do the same thing at home?
I'm not able to know if I'm doing the exercises right because I have no eyes on me who can correct me.
What level of yoga would you like to do today? Beginner. For learning basic poses. What type of beginner yoga do you feel like? Flexibility. Strength. Relaxation. Balance. Relaxation. How long do you want the session to go on? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. You selected beginner relaxation yoga for 15 minutes. Keep the phone camera facing towards the yoga mat with no obstacles in between. There should be around 2 to 4 steps between the mat and the phone. Say ready when you are ready to start.
Ready.
Lift and stretch your right leg all the way back to 6 o'clock. Move your right leg slightly lower so it is parallel with the floor.
Seems like you're a quick learner. You completed this exercise in 5 fewer steps than last time.
Yeah, so that was your guide, and you might have noticed that what Nadia said pretty much almost directly fed into this, and yeah, that was again very insightful for me, and there were a few unanswered questions, right, which I haven't talked about yet, like the technology and why is it a phone? So for the technology bit, I was just wondering what could actually behave like a guide, right? What can actually detect wrong poses and then correct it? Because in order to correct wrong poses, you have to actually detect them, right, in the first place. So I started out with going to motion capture studios. I tried out motion capture suits, but soon realized they're too expensive and no one really wants to wear a suit, right, when they're trying to do yoga. And that led me to this technology called computer vision, which you can see over here, some early iterations. Basically, what it does is it can almost accurately track how your joints are in any given scene, especially if you see on the bottom right, that's the Connect by Microsoft. And it evolved like this. Over here, you can see on the bottom left are my peers from CID. On the right is Fleming, who was also in the video. And yeah, it kind of, the fidelity of this evolved over time. It went from just a yoga mat to like a basic rough prototype, which is on the previous slide, to a more refined one, as you can see over here, which became almost 100% accurate. And why an app, right? I'm going to be honest. I never thought this was going to be an app. I I was really ignorant, and I actually never thought visually impaired people would use a phone, because we are so used to using a phone with our sight. That's what I thought. I couldn't have been more wrong, honestly. And and Inga and Fleming and everyone else told me the same. They just said, I tested like different devices and so on. They just said, just put it in my phone. That's the only way I'm going to use it. And if you guys want to see how they use the use the phone, you could see it in the video. Basically, right, they're swiping around, and you can also try it on your phone. If you have an iPhone, you can try switching on voiceover and test it out. Yeah, so and overwhelmingly the consensus was it had to be an app. And I just did some secondary research just so I wasn't biased by my sample size, and it turns out 95% of visually impaired people do use apps across the world. Yeah, so that was the story of Yoguide and how it actually came into existence. And yeah, I hope everyone was following up till then. And the present day, right? What happened to Yoguide? So I got prototype further. That's my brother on the left. I think he's probably watching now. And that's my pair from CID. As you can see, it got to a point where it can accurately detect and correct your pose. And soon after, Lego actually reached out and they wanted to test the core of this technology, but in a different market, to see if something like this would work in the children and family well-being space, right? If you could incorporate the same technology to create these playful experiences that the whole family could take part in. And I just realized that there's so many different applications of the technology that came out of it. I just want to go back to the whole bit about inclusive design, right? It can, if you start out with inclusive design and not as an afterthought, I just feel it can give rise to design that are beneficial for everyone. And yeah, so this happened. We worked for 3 months to see if the idea would be a fit, but unfortunately that did not work out. And right now, unfortunately, it's on hold while I focus my attention on Prophecy, which is an agency we are starting with two incredible colleagues that I have. Yeah, and yeah, handing the mic back over after this. But first, I'd like to thank everyone. I don't think it's definitely not me who did this. I think it's everyone. It was completely generative. I think everyone had so much knowledge, and I just had to kind of bring that out. And just special shout out to IBOS, which was the Institute of Blind and Partially Sighted in Copenhagen, my peers and faculty at CID, and Paula Tay, who was my advisor for the project. Yes. So going back to you guys. Thank you.
Wow, awesome. Siddharth, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it was, I definitely felt yeah, you took us through your journey with all the ups and downs and your learnings, right? So I think this was very interesting to hear also, like, you know, all the things you have learned on the way. And this is so, I think, like, fascinating for me to hear, right? Especially when it comes to user groups you haven't really worked before with. So super interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Quite a fascinating journey, and I really love to see all the thoughts you put into it, especially your research process. Very fascinating to me, and also how you kind of nailed down the problem, because this is sometimes a problem if you don't really know where to focus on, and you just like went for research and looked for different kind of problems to focus on one in the end. Super interesting. Before we get to Q&A, I would love to hear about your, I would say, like, most interesting learning throughout this this process, where you had, like, I don't know, a moment of some kind of an eureka moment, or what was like the most interesting thing for you throughout this this project?
I think, first of all, thank you so much. I think it was definitely the personal guide thing for me. Like, I just went in with completely no idea of what the solution was going to be like, and just organically, Fleming in the first place suggested it, and every time I just kept testing it across like dozens of times, and every time it just stayed true.
Another friendly reminder to mute yourself. Okay, so Kesha, in the awesome, thank you. I mean, the little party never, killed somebody, but better later after the Q&A. Okay, so yeah.
Someone's having fun.
Yeah, right.
No, but
Awesome.
yeah. So I think that was it, and that stood true every time. And especially when I went to the yoga session with Nadia, I think just seeing how she's giving this personal attention and how she's giving out instructions was kind of just mind blowing. That just, like, I could see the concept in my head at that moment. That's, yeah. I think that was the most insightful.
Yeah, like the really big focus on research. Super interesting also to see that in your presentation, like all your learnings you had and really working with people who have those kind of problems you want to solve. So super interesting. Also, a few comments already here in the chat from Sophia, for example. So she said that this could be super helpful for everybody during COVID, right? So most people also switched to online workouts and had the same problems. I mean, not the same, right? But they even struggled. So how difficult is it for people who don't have sight to control or to check if they're doing it right? You can still watch the video, but even for people with excited people, was that kind of a challenge. So this shows how interesting it is to focus on like the accessibility part first, right? Everyone who has any kind of questions, feel free to share them in the chat. There are already a lot of questions coming, so Sid, I guess there are a lot of things for you to answer. So I could just ask, first of all, amazing. How available is this tech? How easy is it to implement this into apps and solutions? And what are the challenges in computer vision tech? So what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any experiences there?
Yes, yeah, for sure. There's also a question if the work in tech is under an open source license. I can also include that in.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the technology used is open source. It's open postnet is what they're called, and Apple also has their own post detection and machine learning algorithm, which are completely free to use. So it's all free. When I made this in 2019, I would not say the technology was very accurate, uh, especially when you're moving around when there's multiple people. I'd say over these 2 years, it's become even better, and I see it becoming really, really accurate even in a year or two. I see a few of these apps coming out after I made this project, and I see most of them have used their own custom sort of machine learning software, because it might not be completely there yet, but it's quite close. So just the technology, it's called post detection if anyone wants to look it up. And what it basically does is it forms a model. It's been trained so many times. It forms a model of where your joints are, right? It can detect where your elbow is, it can detect where your shoulder is, and so on across your body. And then what I did was just basically calculate the angles between these and compared it to what it should actually be, and then gave out instructions.
Wow, quite impressive. Interesting also for sharing that, so everyone can check that out if that's open source. I think pretty interesting for different kind of projects. Maybe also other people are working on similar things, so make sure to check that out. And another question, and this is also I found like super interesting was, you know, your way into like designing an app, right? When you mentioned that, first of all, you thought those kind of this user group really doesn't really use an app. Then you realized, yes, they do. How was your approach, or how was your process actually designing an app for blind people, or for people with like who can see, right? So how was that? I mean, we saw some sneaks in the video, but I would love to hear a little bit about your way and your process there as well. If you can share a little bit about it.
Yeah, that was also one of my favorite parts about the project. I got to learn so much. But one thing I think that is true for regular UI design, and this is just contrast. So just keeping in mind they're not completely 100% blind, right? They can still make out light sources and so on. And Fleming actually told me, like when I was testing it with him with a very dark background, you must have noticed in the video it was like dark purple and white on it, and he could actually make out which were the actionable parts and which weren't. But that's not the whole story. So in order to actually understand, you'd have to use voiceover and understand how voiceover is used, which is usually by swiping across. So let's say you swipe across and you go to the next item, and you swipe and then you go to the next item, and so on. You can also use your voice, and what the phone does is it reads out whatever is written. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I arranged it in such a way that, if they swiped, it would behave like this. And it took a few tries. Initially it wasn't really working that well, but by the end they were quite happy with it, and they could use, I had created around 5 or 6 different screens just to get them to the session. But by the end, Fleming especially was quite happy with how it turned out. Just, yeah, he could use the app flawlessly.
Nice. So did you get some like user feedback from your testers? How was that received?
Yeah, they would use voiceover, and I was just see how they're using voiceover. A lot of the times that was the issue, like just making it in a way that swiping would lead to the correct menu item, for example, arranging them in such a way, and even coding them in such a way that they are one below another, and making sure the app flow is like that, right? So if you'd see the screens, they're kind of just list items one below the other, which just, yeah, I think I was making it too complex earlier, making it kind of like headspace and having too many things in there. And in the end, what worked was just keeping it simple, one below the other.
Interesting. Yeah, it's always like a process, and you learn, throughout just like testing it out and realizing that you probably need to change a few things. So you already mentioned coding. So like the first prototype you came up with is like a coded one, or was it like built with a design tool, or how was your approach?
The app prototype?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I made it on Webflow. It was quite quick to put together. So it was a website. I just opened the website on their phone and they could play around with it. I'm sure that website must still be around. I'll try to look for a link. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's awesome for testing and prototyping. And so I think especially in your in the project you shared, the whole, like it was for me so interesting to hear how you integrated different kind of people, right? Like your testers, like the people you work with, and like what kind of research you did. And there's one question in the comments, which I think is also really interesting. How did the yoga teacher react to your idea? Were they maybe even scared about being redundant, or were they more supportive? So how was that, like this kind of conversation when you shared your idea?
Yeah, I don't have, yes, she was quite excited by it. I don't think it actually makes anyone redundant. It just adds to the ecosystem of things, right? If someone wants to do it at home, they can do it at home. If someone wants to do it with a trainer, they can do it with a trainer. If someone wants to do it on the phone with a trainer remotely, they can do that too. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. I don't think it's really replacing anyone, and that's, yeah, not the impression Nadia gave either.
Awesome. Okay. I mean, that's, I think, like super interesting to hear that you got so much like support and positive feedback from all the people you spoke with. I guess this has been like very fascinating project in Copenhagen, and so nice that you got so much support there. Um, if you compare, your time in Copenhagen there at the university there, to like the situation in India right now. How is that different? This is something I'm personally very interested in. I guess most people as well. If you compare that, not only the design scene, but also like the design process and the general design approach, how is that different, or is that even different, or is that like very, very similar? How do you see that?
Okay, loaded question.
A
But
loaded question, yeah. We
I,
also,
I'm not sure I'm the expert on this, but I'll still give my 2 cents.
yeah.
So Copenhagen, I didn't I didn't really get a full glimpse of Danish design just because our cohort was completely international. There were people from all over Europe, US, South America, Asia, everywhere. So the way they taught us, I would say, is pretty global, kind of like the methods IDEO sort of brought to the forefront, right? And then kind of made that into this quick iterative process. And CID kind of was like that. They taught us to be really quick, very experimental, very research focused. And for me, that was quite eye opening. Before this, I'd been working in a product design startup. Uh, I had no, I had no process. I was just doing things on the fly. And yeah, I was making screens and a bunch of things. I never really knew how to do research, how to create these experiments, right? And this pretty much changed how me as a designer completely, and just opening my sort of mindset to different processes. Speaking of India, I do feel it's growing really, really fast. There's a lot of good designers here, and especially when you look at the craft side of things, I think they're on par with pretty much anyone out there. Yeah, I think UX maturity, there's still some time to catch up, only because the design scene is relatively very, very new here. But yeah, it's going pretty fast. There's some really good designers. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, really helpful for you probably that you spent this year and in Copenhagen and now back in India. So, yeah, how are your? I mean, you said already that you started your own agency now, and you focus on your own projects. How is the situation for you right now in India? Do you still feel that this is, the country you want to live, or are you thinking maybe about like going back to Europe, to Copenhagen, and working from there, or what are your future plans?
Another loaded question. No, so
Very so okay, one after the other. The first is, do you would like to stay in India, or do you think about like maybe coming back to Europe?
yeah, I don't know. Is the answer. I'm open to both. I like staying in India and I also like staying in Europe. So I don't know if it's really a thing anymore with the whole world going remote. Like maybe you work 6 months from India, maybe you work 6 months from Europe. I don't know, but yeah, it's always an option, which is cool, which wasn't the case earlier. Sorry, coming to your second question, could you repeat that?
Second question is, what are your future goals? I mean, you just started your agency. What are your goals with this agency? Do you want to focus on inclusion? And I should really focus on one question, right? So what are your future plans? And then question is coming.
No, my attention is weak anyway. I couldn't get both questions. But yeah, my future plans with this agency, it's something we've also thought about a lot, but I have no concrete answer. But since this is we're working in the product design space, which is what I like, and we're working with these early stage startups where you can actually sort of strategize and dictate the direction in which the product should go using the methods we all learned at CID. Funny story, my one of my colleagues is also from CID, so we are just trying to bring that methodology into the Indian product design scene, and yeah, having a very systematic experimental research focused approach. and help working side by side with the founders of these companies, and also hopefully teaching them how to run this process by themselves and coming up with products that may hopefully stand out. Yeah.
So super interesting to hear that your co-founder is also from Copenhagen, that you probably met there. If you need to share a little bit more about the Indian design industry, I guess most people probably haven't really had too much contact with the Indian design scene. So how's the whole design industry in India? Are there any like meetups, design hubs, and how do you connect to each other? So how would you describe the whole design scene there compared to maybe what you've seen in Europe?
Okay, so I would say yes, there is a design hub in India. It's Bangalore. They call it the Silicon Valley of India, which I'm not sure about, but it's where all the big products usually come out from, and that's where a lot of designers are also based, including two of my colleagues. But I think from what I've seen, the design in India is mostly revolving around products, digital products, similar to in the US, I would say, and also around the craft of like illustration and graphic design and brand design and so on, right? So some things like these are, I would say, quite popular, and also people are really, really good at these things. And I think apart from product design, there's very little generally UX design being practiced, at least from what I've seen. But yeah, that's just from my experience.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So a lot of space or a lot of opportunities maybe for you guys, for your agency to to support the design scene there. I mean, also great to hear that there's room for improvement. Also always need people who who started that and really focus on that. So in your project, you focused so much on like inclusion and accessibility, and I would honestly really love to hear if this is something you also want to focus in or in the project you're working on right now. This is something you even have the freedom to focus on, or if this is just like a personal topic you're interested in.
I think definitely the second one. So right now the client we're working with is in a B2B space, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Although I think where it does make sense, I would really love to practice it from the start, just from the get-go. But yeah.
Awesome, because I think like this was like so innovative, your approach, your idea, and how you started this whole idea that so many other companies or projects could kind of use this mindset for their products to integrate so many user groups that are left out right now. And I think like the whole topic of accessibility and inclusion is like so important, and we definitely need to push that. So really awesome that you focused on that, and I really hope that a lot of companies and designer really get that inspiration and think about those kind of user groups that are left out, and design solutions for them. But of course it's much more difficult. You can copy a lot of things, but you need to really dig deep into like research and everything what you have done, right? Like talking to people, asking questions, and having a lot of like aha moments where you challenge yourself and realize, oh, maybe I was wrong. So yeah, I think this is really, really fascinating for me. So I will just check the question so I don't forget to ask something at the end. There's only one more question from Jake, and he asked as final question here, if there is something that is interesting for you, maybe in a topic, I mean, obviously like accessibility, right? But if there is something you think, okay, this is an interesting trend or an interesting topic, what really fascinates you right now? So, I mean, you also have your personal things like music, for example, but is there something that's really inspiring you right now?
I think what's always inspired me is just playing around with new technology. You could also see that in my project, which is just using computer vision to solve something. But yeah, it's just this whole question is a little bit like I'm not sure what the field of UX is right now. I think it's very different from what it used to be and where it's going. So it's a little bit hard to answer. Like UX can mean so many things, but in general, what keeps me inspired is yeah, playing around with new technology, solving challenges that I haven't been exposed to before.
That's awesome. I mean, that's definitely like the most important part when it comes to actually solving problems, and you know, always learning. And this is what you've done like so well in your project. So awesome mindset. Hope you can keep that. It's awesome. There one last question is this is also, I think, like really good for all the designers who are listening there, maybe a little bit younger designers, future new talent designers here. If you need to share one recommendation for young designers or for people who want to explore the UX industry, what would you recommend them? You know, you from your personal experience right now.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know. Okay, so I think what I would have done differently was just start by building out a project, right? Just go out and start talking to people. And the more you talk to people, the more you realize what problems exist, and then work on solving those problems in any way. Even after talking to those people, like talk to people at every single stage. And I think people underestimate the value of doing that. And if you start off by doing that, then you're already like ahead of the pack.
I think honestly that's a very awesome tip, because you learn a lot actually if you do that, but most people don't do it because they don't really see the importance when it comes to talking to other people, doing research and testing. So I think it's a really awesome tip, especially for young designers. Thank you all so much. Also for all the people who ask those amazing questions. Awesome. I think that's so nice. Those discussions are so important for all of us because we all learned something, and I guess that everyone has a few takeaways that we can take home and to our work, to our projects. Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. So I also want to ask, want to thank all the whole UX Design Awards team, and not only our awesome speaker today, but also Ake, Magda, Fabian, Billy, and Jake. Thank you so much for organizing that and for putting so much energy in those kind of community building events and for the whole competition. That's really awesome. If you want to join our next events, feel free to connect on social networks. All the links are in the chat, so just follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter, everywhere where you can find us, and check out our next events. There are a few really cool things coming up. So first, there's another deep dive on the 14th of July, so in more or less 2 weeks. This will be an interesting one. And we also have another new talent track. So this is in around 5 weeks, the 28th of July. And this will be a super interesting session as well with Xion Quang. She's currently a product designer at the studio Rodrigo in Brooklyn, New York. And in her presentation, she's going to walk us through her award-winning project. And this is about privacy and data collection, and it's called 10 Bytes. So pretty interesting, same time, a little bit different Zoom place. So mark your calendars. I would really love to see you there. Will be super interesting to see you there as well. So I hope you all enjoyed this session. Feel free to connect with us, also to connect with Sid. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. I think he's open to chat, whatever kind of things, maybe for projects, maybe for his agency, maybe for questions. And yes, thank you so much for being here. It was a really good time. Thank you for your questions and hope to see you in the next session. Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Patricia.